On Tuesday, a massive story hit the Washington Post with a Harvard study estimating that thousands died in Puerto Rico because of Hurricane Maria. More specifically, the study estimates that at least 4,645 deaths can be linked to the hurricane and its immediate aftermath, making the storm far deadlier than previously thought. Official estimates have placed the number of dead at only 64, a count that has drawn sharp criticism from experts and local residents, and spurred the government to order an independent review that has yet to be completed. Now, compare the over 4,600 deaths from Hurricane Maria to Hurricane Katrina, that killed about 1,800 people. Now, Katrina has been tied indefinitely to George Bush's legacy, yet when we discuss how terrible Trump has done as a president, Hurricane Maria rarely ever comes up. Now, this seems like a massive story that cable news would want to cover, and in fact send a team out there to cover this story on the ground, especially now that 8 months later, 13,000 Puerto Ricans still lack electricity. 283 schools are slated to close because thousands of people have fled the island, and another hurricane season is less than a week away. But as Media Matters writes, instead of focusing on the situation in Puerto Rico, cable news focused on Roseanne instead. The May 29 broadcasts of MSNBC, combined with the network's flagship morning show the next day, spent 21 minutes discussing the findings. CNN followed with just under 10 minutes of coverage, and Fox covered the report for just 48 seconds. By contrast, cable news spent over 8.5 hours discussing a tweet from Barr describing Jared, a black woman, as the offspring of the Muslim Brotherhood and Planet of the Apes, and the subsequent cancellation of her show. And taking a look at the graph put together by Media Matters, you can see a clear difference in the amount of time cable news spent covering Roseanne versus how much time they spent covering Puerto Rico during the same time frame. Now, I think there's a few reasons for this, and they can either be legitimate reasons or not, depending on how you view cable news and what you think the news should actually cover. So, the Roseanne cancellation, the reason why I think it was so largely covered is because, well, partly because it's a topic that anyone can have an opinion on. So, it's a conversation starter. So, you can put this news on MSNBC or CNN or Fox News, and you can have people on and have a debate about whether Roseanne should have been canceled or not because of Roseanne's racist tweet. So these cultural issues, for whatever reason, attract a lot of people. It's an issue that doesn't take much thinking and really just comes down to how you view free speech and how much that free speech should have an effect on your job, or where the line is in terms of what you should be allowed to say until you are reprimanded for what you do say. So it's easy entertainment. And that brings me to the issue with these sorts of topics, and that's that entertainment should not be the driving factor for cable news. So while I can explain why Roseanne was covered so much, ultimately it should be up to the networks to decide what should get the coverage. And when you have a network that is bringing in $1 billion or over $1 billion and is putting in hundreds of millions of dollars in your news coverage, maybe some of that money should be used for actual news gathering, should be used for investigative journalism, should be used to send a team out to Puerto Rico and cover it on the ground and make that an issue. So cable news oftentimes sets the agenda. They are the ones that tell the world, tell the country what you should be focused on. So if they're focused on Roseanne, then the country will be focused on Roseanne. And look, I'm well aware of my hypocrisy here. So I covered the Roseanne thing and I didn't cover Puerto Rico. Now, my excuse is that I'm one person. So the same day that I covered the Roseanne topic, I also did 30 minutes on a debate that was happening in Canada. So because I'm one person, I have to kind of pick my time and decide where I'm going to focus my attention to. But when you're cable news and you have hundreds, if not thousands of employees, and they're all working on news, and you have millions of dollars going into your budget, then we should expect something more. And to just give you an idea of how much money these news organizations have, a 2014 Pew Research study reported by the Washington Post found that CNN revenues were about $1.1 billion, with their news investment at $757 million, MSNBC revenue at $475 million, with their news investment at $272 million, and Fox News revenue at $1.89 billion, with their news investment at $848 million. Now, you'd think with that sort of investment and revenue coming in that you'd be able to cover both of these stories properly. So yes, fine, still cover Roseanne, but also cover what's happening in Puerto Rico. Cover this study. Cover how there are schools and people that still don't have electricity. And the fact that the government is clearly covering up how many people actually died in Puerto Rico. So this is a real news story that needs real investigative journalism and needs a team there on the ground in Puerto Rico. But despite their budgets, they go for the easy stories. Now, as a Canadian, I see a real difference between Canadian media coverage and American media. So in Canada, we actually, for the most part, don't do a bad job. So Canadian news networks cover policy issues. So right now, for example, there's an election going on in Ontario, and the discussions around the election aren't about who is slamming the other person or who's smearing who and how they're smearing or the drama going around the campaigns. Most of the coverage of this election is on the platform, or lack thereof in the case of Doug Ford. But the platforms and the policies and the promises and where the candidates are, where they're campaigning, what's happening on the ground, the polling, of course. But it's so weird to see how Canada covers politics and the stories that they gravitate to compared to the US. Now, of course, Roseanne was also covered in Canada, but nowhere to the same degree as it was in the US. We still covered other issues, other stories that were going on, other actual news stories that were going on in the country and around the world. So, I don't know. Clearly, there is a problem here. Now, you could say maybe it's on the side of the viewer, because viewers gravitate towards stories like Roseanne over a story like Puerto Rico. But the whole point of a news organization is that they are supposed to be above that. So despite how the ratings, what gets them the most ratings, as a news organization, you need to cover what is important. You need to push that out there and make that the story. And in this case, they didn't. They chose Roseanne over the deaths in Puerto Rico. Hey, if you like this video, hit that subscribe button below and consider throwing me a few bucks on Patreon at patreon.com/therationalnational or therationalnational.com/join.